All right, to one of our top international stories now. Thousands of teachers in Hong Kong have taken to the streets in a show of solidarity with pro-democracy activists. Dressed in black and braving heavy rain, the teachers held a rally under the slogan, "Safeguard the Next Generation." It's the first of 3 demonstrations planned for today, we understand, and about, 11 weeks of confrontations between police and protesters have plunged Hong Kong into turmoil. The demonstrations were triggered by a controversial bill which would have allowed extraditions to mainland China, but has since evolved into a call for wider democratic reforms. Let's get the latest now, and Patrick Fock joins us now live from Hong Kong for an update. Patrick, thank you very much indeed for your time. A very good morning to you. What's the latest on the ground with regards to the anti-government protests?
Good morning to you. Well, look, last night there were thousands of people that turned out for a protest which was essentially aimed at calling on the international community to put pressure on Beijing over what's happening in Hong Kong. But look, people are turning out again today, and as you mentioned, it is very wet indeed today. We're at the tail end of this current rally that's taking place. There are still a few people just joining behind me with their umbrellas. But, you know, the purpose of this particular rally is actually to protest against the mainland tourists and tour buses that have arrived in this part of town and putting a lot of pressure on the infrastructure and the resources on this area. This area is close to the end of the train line, which connects from Kowloon all the way to Shenzhen across the border. But this protest movement just keeps on going strong.
You know, there seems already, Patrick, to be some casualties with regards to these protests, some high-profile casualties, and I'm talking in this regard about the resignation of the Cathay Pacific CEO. Was it because some of his employees were participating in the protests?
Well, there's certainly a sense that it is connected to that, and as we know, a lot of companies are being put under pressure. That resignation by Rupert Hogg was a dramatic event that took place yesterday, and it comes at a time when Cathay Pacific's really been facing a lot of difficulties over the protest movement. And as you say, there were a number of people, 4 people in total, that were let go from Cathay Pacific as a result of their involvement with the protest. But there's a lot of other companies that have been forced to make apologies to China as well, and also align themselves with the Communist Party as well over the situation in Hong Kong. So I think the point to make here is that, you know, although Beijing seems very reluctant to go down the route of sending PLA troops into Hong Kong for the time being, there are still other ways that it can exert pressure on this movement.
You mentioned the Communist Party, and these protests come at a time when there's this build-up to the, I think it's October 1st, when they will be marking 70 years, the 70th anniversary of communist rule in China.
Yeah, that's right, and it's a really good point that you make there, and this is certainly something that Beijing will want to have over by the time that anniversary comes around. That is a big event that is taking place in China, and really Beijing wants to show a good front at that time and make sure that people are peaceful and happy. But look, I can tell you that, you know, as I say, the protest movement isn't dying down anytime soon. The local government seems to think, or is banking on it dying down at the start of school term, which is next week. But look, there's been a study that's been conducted by one group, and it surveyed around 20,000 local students across 350 different schools, and 50% of them said that they would boycott classes. So that's a very clear indication that that's not going to stop this from continuing for now.
Patrick, what's the situation at the Hong Kong airport? Earlier this week, we saw thousands flooding that major international hub, that major international airport, one of the busiest in the world. At that time, grounding some flights. What do you know? What are you hearing on the ground? What's the latest from that airport?
Well, everything at the airport is back to normal now, but of course there were some chaotic scenes there, and the protesters also were on the end of a lot of criticism for what happened. You know, there was a real level of unrest that I think a lot of people felt was unacceptable. The mood over the last couple of days has been really quite different. The protest that took place last night was extremely orderly and went without any hitch. And the other thing is that this rally that's taken place here, you can't see them right now. A lot of them have moved further on, but there are thousands further up from here. And there was a big focus on keeping it orderly. There were people shouting over speakers, look, we can only continue this procession until 5:30. That's what we've been given permission to do. Don't get into any confrontation with any potential agitators. If there are people confronting you, then report them to the police, take down evidence. But really, this is about winning back public opinion after what happened at the airport.
Yeah, well, speaking about public opinion, we did see those visuals of protesters and police clashing. At this stage, your assessment, Patrick, who is winning the hearts and minds of observers?
Well, I think it depends on which side you stand on. I mean, obviously, China has 1.4 billion supporters. A lot of people that are being shown a narrative of this protest movement, saying that it's all about violence and it's all about people wanting independence. Look, there is a segment of the protesters that certainly are secessionists, but I think the vast majority don't think of that as being a realistic option, and actually all they want is for the principle of one country, two systems to be respected. But I think there is a lot of international support, and as we know, there are lots of movements going on in other countries like Australia and New Zealand and Canada and the UK as well. And there was also reports last night or yesterday of clashes that took place between some students in Melbourne, or I shouldn't say students, supporters of the movement in Hong Kong and Melbourne with pro-China supporters as well.
You're talking about the one country, two systems, and recently some major fashion designers came, under criticism for certain T-shirts that were out there. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, Versace and Coach were the two labels that really landed themselves in hot water. And look, it's a fairly common mistake that's made. They're certainly not the first companies in the world that have marked Hong Kong down as being independent territories, or rather not listed them as being part of China. But it comes at a very sensitive time, and so it's just simply not gone down well with China at all.
Back to the protesters, Patrick, give us a sense of who we're talking about here. Who are the individuals that make up these group of protesters?
Well, I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of students and young people that are disillusioned with what's happening in Hong Kong, people that think that there is no opportunity for them. This is very much about the wealth gap in Hong Kong, income inequality, the housing crisis. So a lot of students involved, but I think that there are a lot of people, there's a real cross-section of society really that supports the movement in general Hong Kong and thinks that there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed in Hong Kong as well. People talk about this being a leaderless movement, but I think there are some voices that are certainly emerging from this, and notably Benny Tai, the law professor who was one of the leading voices in the 2014 umbrella protest, was released on bail from prison the other day, and we might see someone like him pick up the reins and try and continue the momentum with what's happening in Hong Kong and take leadership of things here. We're certainly not seeing an awful lot of leadership from the Hong Kong government at the moment.
Right, Patrick Fox, thank you very much indeed for your reporting. Patrick is coming to us live from Hong Kong.